Here's the thing. The aspirations of the EU have been noble from the start: to foster peace and cooperation between like-minded countries on the continent, to protect and promote human rights, and to be a force for good in the world. But when it comes to LGBTQ people, the EU has often been too cowardly and/or too compromised to fight for us in the way that its stated ideals and founding principles demand it to. Countries like Hungary have been only marginally penalized and reprimanded despite blatant and unyielding attempts to silence and terrorize our community. And while we could be here for days highlighting every time the Union has thrown our people under the bus for trade deals with regressive regimes or to temporarily appease dictators in order to buy their fossil fuels, today we actually, finally, have something positive to discuss. Something that may just indicate that the EU does place some importance on the rights of its LGBTQ citizens. You see, just over a week ago, on the 25th of November 2025, the Court of Justice of the European Union issued a ruling that under EU law, all member states of the Union must recognize same-sex marriages that were conducted in other member states. Meaning that if a gay Romanian couple gets married in Sweden, Romania must fully recognize their marriage. Or if a lesbian couple from Bulgaria gets married in Ireland, then say Slovakia likewise has to recognize their marriage. Simply put, no EU country can legally deny the marital rights of any EU citizens any longer. Now, the case that brought about this victory involved a gay couple from Poland who married in Berlin in 2018. When they returned to Poland and asked to have their German marriage certificate transcribed into the Polish civil registry, the request was refused, as Poland's government does not recognize marriage equality or even civil unions. But because this couple's claim implicated core EU rights like free movement, residence, and family life, the matter was referred from Poland's Supreme Administrative Court to the EU's Court of Justice. Of course, the court sided with the gay couple, as its job is to interpret European Union law, and the law is clear. In siding with the couple, the court rested its ruling on several core legal foundations, including the foundational right to freedom of movement and residence for European Union citizens. By traveling, residing, or returning to their home member state, citizens carry with them their marital status, even if acquired elsewhere. Denying recognition would effectively penalize their exercise of that freedom. Second, the right to respect for private and family life, as protected under the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. The court emphasized that refusal of recognition constitutes discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation, which is forbidden under Article 21 of the Charter. Additionally, the principle that national legal definitions of marriage cannot be used to undermine rights derived from EU citizens and EU law obligations. The court drew a clear line. While member states remain free to define their domestic family law, they cannot refuse recognition of valid foreign marriage when it comes to the rights conferred by EU law. In light of all this, the ruling found that refusing to recognize LGBTQ marriages conducted in other member states amounts to an infringement of the freedom to move and reside and of the right to a normal private family life. Now, sadly, this ruling does not require member states to legalize marriage equality domestically, but, of course, it does require them to respect, without distinction and/or added burdens, marriages lawfully contracted in other member states. Now, just about now, you may be asking yourself, will socially backwards and radically religious countries, like, say, Bulgaria, actually honor their treaties and follow the laws of the Union that they decided to join? Well, the judgment is binding under EU law. Member states are legally required to comply, and failure to recognize same-sex marriages acquired abroad has been clarified to be a blatant violation of obligations under EU treaties and the Charter of Fundamental Rights. Unfortunately, though, it is likely that some enforcement mechanisms may turn out to be required, as a handful of member states have a long history of behaving illegally and refusing to respect the terms of their accession to the Union. And it's hard to imagine that these traitorous and unethical countries will suddenly begin to act in accordance with the agreements they willingly entered into when they joined. Nevertheless, the law is clear, and national authorities that wish to stay compliant with their accession treaty must update civil registry procedures to allow transcriptions of foreign same-sex marriages under the same conditions and without additional hurdles. This means the same paperwork, the same administrative processes, and the same timeline regardless of the genders of those being married. Now, Poland has indicated that it will comply with EU law. But if, or sadly, should I say when, a different member state, like perhaps Slovakia or Bulgaria or Romania, refuses to implement the ruling, the European Commission or individuals brought before national courts could trigger infringement proceedings, which legally should result in financial penalties, suspension of certain EU-derived benefits, and other sanctions permitted under EU enforcement rules. But while the EU does have quite a few options on the table for discipline, it does remain to be seen how rigorously it will actually fight for us, considering how subpar its response has been to other attacks on our people over the past decade in the very same countries that are most likely to refuse to honor the court's rulings. Personally, I believe that refusing should be grounds for expulsion from the Union, but unfortunately, that is almost certainly not going to happen. And just to clarify, for those who don't fully understand why this issue is so important, let me make it super clear. Marriage means access to healthcare plans and medical visits, to social security and taxation benefits, rights to inheritance and parental status, to pensions, and of course, so much more. Marriage is a legal institution and has fuck all to do with backwards religious beliefs. Marriage existed before monotheism, and marriage will exist long after monotheism. And until everyone is treated equally inside the entire EU, the EU can't pretend to give a flying fuck about human rights. And ultimately, if countries don't want to honor their accession treaties, they should consider removing themselves from the equation. Countries like Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, and Poland, among some others unfortunately, have long resisted legal recognition of same-sex relationships, owing to undemocratic and religious forces that work day and night to keep their societies in Russia's orbit and uphold their corrupt theocratic oligarchies. And yet, these states continue to enjoy the full benefits of EU membership: access to structural funds, subsidies, free movement, trade, and the prestige and security associated with belonging to the Union. To maintain these benefits, while denying recognition to queer married couples, is fundamentally hypocritical and dishonorable, and shows that they are leeches, not allies. It amounts to saying, we want the economic, political, and strategic advantages of EU membership, but we reject its core commitments to human dignity, equality, and non-discrimination. Respecting this ruling is not just a question of marriage rights alone. It's a test of whether countries have the ability to respect the humanity of all their citizens, regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity. Allowing any country to remain in the EU while it refuses to give its LGBTQ citizens the same rights as its straight and cis citizens is immoral to the highest degree. The Union's foundations rest on the progressive values of liberty, equality, and respect for human rights. A state that rejects those core ideals should not expect to partake in the privileges of membership. People are free to disagree about many things. Human rights are not one of those things. At the very least, though, we can take solace in the fact that if member states attempt to ignore the ruling, the evidence suggests that they will face a combination of legal action, political pressure from the Commission and other member states, and financial penalties. While the court's decision does not itself specify a fixed penalty, like a fine per day, EU enforcement mechanisms have been used in the past to compel compliance with EU law, particularly when a state repeatedly fails to recognize fundamental rights guaranteed by treaty or charter obligations. Moreover, ignoring this ruling would increasingly isolate dissenting states within the Union. Public and political pressure from other member states, from civil society, and from EU institutions would likely mount over time. They would have to choose between upholding bigotry and being cast out, effectively, from the shared values that sustain the EU. And given the importance of freedom of movement and free residence for EU citizens and their spouses, especially in a bloc where cross-border migration, work, study, and family life are deeply integrated, widespread non-compliance would destabilize the very foundation of the union's unity. And on a personal note, my boyfriend is from a candidate country, and one that does not have marriage equality or civil unions, unfortunately. We plan to get married at some point in the next few years, and if his country does join the EU, this ruling will be life-changing for us. It will allow us to eventually get married in a country like Denmark or Ireland, and then move back to his country and have our rights recognized, which will make my immigration process easier, on top of all the other benefits I mentioned earlier. This ruling, if respected, will have huge impacts on the lives of millions of LGBTQ couples across the bloc, who are legally entitled by the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights to the same rights as everyone else. I love Europe. I love the mission of the Union, and I hope that it can finally start to live up to its potential as a beacon of secularism, prosperity, and self-determination. And on that note, thank you friends for watching and spending time today with me as we seek to spread the word about important topics in the community. Please consider liking this video and subscribing, as it really helps to please the algorithm gods. And if you really enjoy these videos and want to support me directly so I can keep making them on a routine basis, consider joining the Queer Kingdom officially here on YouTube by becoming a member of the channel. But just your presence here today means the world to me, so thank you for watching, for caring about our global community, and please always remember that good things do still happen even in dark times. Together, I know we can truly make the world a safer and freer place for us all. Until next time, QK out.